Hello.
Good morning, good afternoon, good night.
Me, you, them, everybody.
Yes.
Yeah. So I walked away last week and I really had to think like what my own challenges were last week with myself, excuse me, with energy and trying to explain it and describe it for myself. And I realized that I've spent a lot of my life doing exactly what Jaloki's talking about last week, which was learning my own internal energy, but also everyone else's energy and how I work within their energy, right? While staying focused on myself. And I ended up going through and like finding like all these different things that are steps to take because I know we make it sound so easy that you just do this, 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 and this. But those stages or levels, whatever you want to call them, are very potent and those definitely build on each other because it's like taking baby steps, right? Can you imagine when you're taking baby steps, just like, okay, you stand up and you're like, nope, just kidding, I'm gonna sit back down, right? And so just learning and then keep going, get it back up, nope, don't want to do this. And then your parents are like, oh, walk, 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 just thinking about everybody around you and you're just like, yodo, I'm not doing that. So being able to read that energy of yourself, know your energy of yourself, and know who you are, right? Being able to recognize your own patterns, maybe sometimes the patterns of others, but ultimately it's your own energetic, your own being, your own understanding and awareness of how to move about the world intentionally within your own energy in itself. Mhm. Mhm.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I resonate with that. One way actually of for some native indigenous people to describe those things that we can call energy or energies that we cannot, that are not tangible. One way to describe them is something that you cannot see, but you can see the effect that it has. Okay, so I have something that's happening to me. I don't know what it is, but it makes me feel energy, strong or scared or hurt or pleasure, etc. So I can see the effect. I can feel the effect. I can the touch. Its effect is tangible. So I'd like to share a little disclaimer. I have something in me which it's almost a handicap in my life. You talk about some times ago talking about energy was woo woo, and then even what we call Western modern science uh, uh, discovered a long time ago, more than a century ago, okay, that matter is not material. That anything we think we can touch, feel, sense, etc., doesn't actually have a material essence. It has an energetic essence, which is still a little, eluding. And then we got to, quantum physics, etc. So science has become so woo woo that, most of us, I could say, the general public, we remain in this discovery of science that is 100 years ago. Science have been way much more woo than that. My handicap is that, for me, matter is woo. My mind function more from the energy, from the energetic level, than from the matter. I have to say it. For me, matter is an expression of energy. So
Mhm.
I just wanted to give that.
Yeah, this is
Yeah. Well, it does, because remember, it's the experience. The energy itself doesn't matter. It's the experience we have of the energy that matters, and we experience matter very significantly, and yeah, it matters, but it doesn't exist in the way we're conditioned to believe.
Yeah, it's interesting is what you've all touched on and what Yoloki was saying about matter is um, throughout history, people say, well, how do we explain these things? Like matter, it has to be a thing that we can touch. But energy is really more complicated and it's more difficult for people to understand. But I was watching another show, always do that, where this indigenous person was saying, I don't have the words to describe what I'm feeling, but I'm feeling the energy of this space. And it is a negative energy. And we
mhm.
have to understand what that means to us. So there again, the effect. So couldn't see it, but science, as Yoloki has said as well, we're now discovering that energy is much more powerful than we ever thought it was. It was reduced to, well, if you can't see it, it doesn't matter. But like, look at the little episodes in history, Madame Curie with radioactivity. Well, hell, that sure was felt. She died of radiation poisoning. So she died of something she couldn't see, but she felt it physically and literally. But so talking about energy is a way to shift our conversations, which is what we're doing today, as well as we've done in previously. Is if we start to try to understand how we feel, so we're broadening the scope and the perception of what's going on. So it allows for new things to enter into the exchange between people. So that's the interesting aspect of energy is you talk about, well, what's being felt and what is being generated, because we all generate energy and we all receive energy. So all of a sudden, it is a dynamic experience. It is not a static experience of saying, well, look, that rock, that's solid matter. Well, no, they've even discovered that the atoms in a rock actually move, but we can't see it. Oh, we got a. So as we adjust the
Yes,
energetic
and I think
beam,
now people will be able to probably hear me now. But I think you should probably be able to hear me because my energy was being pervasive in the room, but no one was hearing it. So I'll let everyone.
we were feeling it though.
They were feeling it. And if you're in the chat in YouTube, please let me know if you can now hear me, if that's the case. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that you. Claudia put something in the chat, and I want to call it out. And Claudia, I'd also like to maybe you to aware your world is a reflection of your energetic tone. What you say and think will manifest very swiftly, especially when it matches your emotional frequency. Claudia, would you be willing to say a little bit more about that? And I also have a specific question for you.
Sure. I guess what I will say about that is we're living in a time where we are inundated with energetic fields from without, like we've never experienced before. And I'll share something with you. My husband was having trouble sleeping, and he would wake up in the middle of the night and not be able to go back to sleep. And so we finally had this discussion about that. And I said, well, when you wake up, is your mind going 1,000 miles an hour? And are you in this energetic field of with what's happening out in the world? And he goes, so basically that's it. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, that could be part of, as you're sleeping, your subconscious is trying to deal with all this. And then you wake up and you're in the middle of living in this energy that's really not yours. You're living in this energy that is of the world outside. And so you're not in resonance with yourself. And so if you can understand that that's not your energy, but something else, and drop into who you are as yourself without all of that, then that will help to calm your mind, because who we are at essence is peace. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so if we can drop into who we are as essence, then your mind becomes calmer. And here's another important part of this whole equation, I think, is your intuition. Mm-hmm. And your intuition sometimes gets mixed up with energy that is not yours. And so what you think is intuition is really not intuition. It is an old remembrance of something from the past that told you this is what you need to be afraid of. Okay? You need to keep yourself safe. Mm-hmm. And that is an old remembrance. And so that's not intuition.
Right.
And so I kind of veered off a little bit.
No,
there.
You didn't. But you did exactly. Well, one, it's Rise and Shine Sundays. So welcome to what emerges when you start talking. But secondly, you're talking about what Jaloki said at the very beginning, because energy, when you talk about energy, it shows up in all of these other discussions, right? So when we're talking about personal energy, and I want to make sure that I go back and kind of reset the room, because even though apparently, once again, Ray, I can only say this because Ray has been with me before, I did not click the button to turn my own microphone on in terms of the broadcast. But this morning, we're talking about developing this sense of energetic literacy, which builds from what we were talking about, which is this, not only the capacity to understand our energies, but also those capabilities. And what Claudia was just sharing with us as part of this discussion is that energy signature shows up in all of the different things of whatever we want to talk about. Whatever we want to do, this energetic signature that that we're looking about, this intangible, shows up in almost every other discussion, because that energy, right, Jaloki, is present everywhere. So therefore, the impacts, the effects of it, whether or not we're looking at the psychology of it, because the thing that I had written down is there a difference between our energy and our conditioned thinking? And I really just like to toss that out because, and I know this is maybe more as in Sang's alley, but because there's this tendency to think that our interpretations of energy, is that really genuine, or is that, oh, this is how I'm handling this moment? Do you understand the context of the question?
Yep, sure do. So going back to something Claudia said is about understanding the difference between intuition and what's from the past. And so if you think about when energy shifts, right, or you walk into a room and you feel that energy that we talked about, or whatever that is, and what is it that you automatically do, right? Does your body react? Does your mind react, right? I know I always feel it's always in my body first. And then for me, it's the distinction of what am I actually feeling? Because there's that onset emotion, like what Claudia was talking about. And then there's the deeper, what is happening. But going into that, a lot of times people do a lot of storytelling, right? Oh, they must be acting like this because they must be doing this because. And so then we start giving out energy based off that story we told ourselves, based on why we think their energy is a certain way. And so it kind of, and just, it's hard. This is just one of those topics that's very meticulous in terms of how you distinguish. The distinguishment is going to be very challenging to do, because it is challenging to figure out. I love how Yoloki he loves matter. I actually am from the opposite, right? Matter mattered and energy didn't, until I started growing up. And then I was like, oh, energy does matter. And then how do I then adjust? But I had to use that distinction. And now I know I'm at a place where I'll just ask, like, if someone comes into the room, let's say Ray came in today and he was just hot, the whole room would be like, okay. And then Jamie would probably say something to break the ice, right? And then we would kind of follow Jamie's lead, because now we have the leader to follow the energy, because we'll let Jamie kind of diffuse Ray a little bit, because he understands that, if that makes sense. Right? And then being able to come back and then maybe Ray next week would have a conversation and say, hey, this is what was going on, right? And I want to share. But being able to even ask Ray, hey, Ray, is everything okay? What's going on? And I think that's the part, especially in the storytelling that we have when we're trying to interpret someone's energy, that we then act on the story that we've told ourselves about why they're acting a certain way. Right. But imagine if two people came in here and got angry.
Yeah.
Right. If Ray came in here and was angry and I was angry, then Jamie's like, whoa.
You're 100% where I was wanting to go with this sort of explanation, which is that energy is alive and it can trigger thinking, which is largely conditioned. And it's whether or not your thinking is in alignment with your energy. Is it really that Ray came in hot this morning? Or is it, there's so many things that energy can trigger, right, Jaloki? I mean, this is the thing that when you start looking at those different energies, you're kind of aware of, you kind of have to stay present with it, because energy is alive, right?
Yes, and yes, and yes. and thinking about how do I want to become more
energetically literate.
So for me, this is a lifelong process. It's not something that, oh, I want to become energy literate, I'm going to read a book and I'm literate, or someone is going to teach me. No, it's a lifelong process, and it includes both what I'm going to take from others and my own experience. And I want to focus on the term experience, which is actually an imperience. It's an inside experience. Okay, another disclaimer. I think what I'm about to say is going to really may complicate things, but
But hey, this
it's
is what
right.
we live for. So keep
Right,
going.
right,
You know.
right. I wanna bring the concept of belief, because it is my understanding that in the modern Western culture, again, and Ray mentioned that, people are conditioned or told that you have to see something before you believe it. If even scientifically, the scientific skepticism, scientific doubt, if you cannot prove something and measure it, it does not exist. Okay, I come from a place where if you don't believe in something, you're not going to see it. Okay, and so now this is a belief I have. I have to say it's a belief so people don't take me, I don't sound too arrogant. But frankly, my brothers and sisters, it's not a belief, it's a knowledge. Because I experience it. I cannot prove my experience. If I say I'm hungry, I know I'm hungry. I don't believe I'm hungry. I know I'm hungry, but I cannot prove it to you. Okay, so that's one thing. What Claudia wrote so eloquently and then developed is based on this knowledge. If you expect to, if you expect energy to behave in a certain way when you do certain thing in your mind, in your life, that's what will happen.
So
Materially.
what you're talking about now is aligning our thinking with our energy.
That's part of it.
Okay.
What I'm
Keep
talking
going.
about is that there's a conditioning that we may want to expand or change. And if I'm conditioned that what I don't see does not exist, well, there's a lot of things that I will never see.
Okay.
But they exist.
Well, let me invite some of the people who are in the chat. If you have an experience along the lines of what Jaloki is talking about, please pop it in the chat. We're really wanting to have this discussion because you also gave us another wonderful word, which I just have to be able. I'm going to one day publish something called the Rise and Shine Sundays glossary, and in it will now be the entrance of the word inexperience as opposed to experience, right?
Yes.
Ray, did you catch that word? Imperience?
Yeah.
Have you dealt in that world before with
Well,
imperiences?
I'm gonna tie in with several things that Loki said. Is we are so conditioned to look at from a singular perspective, so our stories get frozen, our understanding gets frozen, but it's still not what's happening in the real world or happening around us as part of the world. The real world is so subjective, but it's fascinating that if you don't believe or you don't look for something, you won't be it or find it. And an interesting story I was watching the other day as well was somebody said, what if this element of history isn't as it's told? But everybody says that's exactly what happened. Notice they said that's what happened. No, that's the singular frozen story. Somebody introduced a variable from another perspective and challenged that view. So it's not one answer, one perspective. It's always evolving, so it's contextual. Every context or every situation is different. Just what, like Sang was saying, is that we get frozen into a story. But am I hearing something that has changed since I last experienced my story? So I think the evolution is part of it, and also being able to see things that we're told aren't real or aren't there, or to look for them, or to be sensitized to the possibility, even if it's just a possibility, then you're going to keep your mind open. And I think that's what Yoloki was really sharing with us, is that if we keep our minds open, our beliefs can evolve and our experiences can evolve.
So
Mhm.
you're saying that, energy, your ability to read energy is what keeps everything open. The idea of this frozen story, I feel like everybody should take a minute and think about what their frozen stories are. But what I I was responding to is we're back on this sort of energetic, and most of those frozen stories are dead. They contain an energy which may or may not be relevant, but you may be still hanging on to that energy. And it's just sometimes recognizing that when one of these stories from your past that comes up that has a very strong energy, it may not be the energy that's present in the moment. And it's that sort of awareness, that's the opening that uh, new energy can provide you, right? And because
Mhm.
it's almost as if energy is the feedback loop, right? It is what's present, even though we want to be able to say it's our frozen stories that are sometimes present. Is that, I see you smiling, saying, is that something that resonates?
Oh yeah, it takes me back to something my sister teaches her children, and kids cry, people, when adults cry, everybody cries, right? And so she'll ask them, "Are you physically hurt or are you mentally hurt?" Right? And when I thought about when she first asked the kids that, and they answered her, right? And my niece, probably like 4 or 5 at the time, was like, mentally, right? Like, so definitely was not taught to feel and express that, to say I was mentally hurt, not physically hurt. So if someone yells at you or something like that, and being able to figure that out as a grown up, right? Because now we have years and years and years of this conditioning of, like we were talking about earlier, what you see, because what we see is where the great portion of our brain interprets things
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what we see. And so, like Yoloki was saying, what we see, and we have to see it to believe it, as they say, right? Because it's the most dominant sense that we have. Even though, I looked up something because I remember reading something a couple of days ago, is when Yoloki was talking about experience and inexperience. There is also studies, right, that people have said that there are more than 5 senses, and one of those happens to be interoception. And that's basically sensing your internal being, your body. What is your body saying? What is it telling you versus what our mind is telling us? Because we are taught, even at an early age, kindergarten, before we even go to school, is what we can see. Well, I don't believe you that your stomach is upset because I don't see it. You're not vomiting, you're not doing this, you're not doing this, you're going to go to school. Right? So think about that as parents. Like, you're like, "Mom, my tummy hurts," but you can't prove that your tummy hurts, but your tummy hurts. Right? But because you don't have these other ailments that go with it, your parents are like, "No, your tummy does not hurt. You're going to school." Right? And then you go to school and then you throw up and you come home and now you're a winner, right? But thinking about that, you're trying to tell someone something that's they can't see. And a lot of times people have a very, very hard time comprehending things they cannot physically see because they just don't believe it.
Mm-hmm. And Jaloki sitting up in the corner going, I knew that, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Of course he did.
what
So,
response?
oh, well, let me complicate a little more. Let's go
We're
further.
here for it.
Let's go
Yay.
further. Sang said, reminded us, I mean, we all know that we have way, way, way more than 5 senses.
Mhm.
But we're still talking about the material senses.
Mhm.
And I want to suggest that for each of those numerous physical senses, material senses, we may have one or more clair senses, our
Mhm.
clair abilities. And these are also, so first, I believe all human beings have clair abilities, developed to a certain degree, more or less, but we can all develop them. And this is another way to increase and develop our sense of energetic literacy. Clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairsentience,
Mhm.
claircognizance. There's clairsalience, empathy. We could say clear empathy, but just empathy, which is a term that is more and more in the consciousness. That's a way to become more energy literate. And then I'm just gonna drop something here, which was mentioned subtly, I think, by Claudia. We've been talking about, and Ray, Jamie, you mentioned that too. We've been talking about how to read and be aware and sense energies, but there are also ways we can develop how we send energy, how we create energy, how we generate and model and shape energies from our own energetic self.
Well, when is that class, Jaloki? Because I really want to learn how to do that,
Mhm.
Actually, I've been doing that class for a long time informally, and it's coming soon in a informal ways.
Okay, well, we will wait for it and we will make that announcement. So, yes, there was a comment in the chat. Claudia, I'll get you in just a second because I'm going to build on this one we got from YouTube. I was at a retreat where women were shouting and shouting all the things they wanted to get rid of: anger, hate, etc. And I became physically ill and had to leave the circle. Again, that's that effect of energy showing up. And so, yeah, thank you for that. So please keep those comments coming in the chat. Claudia, building on what you've heard.
We've been talking, and it's a little bit building on what Loki just said. We've been talking about, we cannot believe what we cannot see. Okay, but there are when people say, "I see this," one automatically assumes you're looking at something with your eyes,
Mm.
but seeing goes much beyond looking at something with your eyes.
Mhm.
Seeing goes into not only seeing something with your eyes, or it may be you're not seeing anything with your eyes, but you are feeling something in your body.
Mhm.
And so I think we need to clarify when we say we're seeing something, it means it's beyond the vision.
Mm-hmm.
It is a totality of bodily senses, as Jaloki was saying, clairvoyance or whatever that is. And I had a circle at one point with some younger people, and we were talking about perspective, and this whole topic of, well, that's not that's not what I saw. Okay, that's not what you saw, but what did you feel with that? And in order to quote unquote see something, we can envision our world. If we can envision our world as a triangle, and usually on a triangle, we're somewhere along the sides or at the bottom. If we can take ourselves to that top of the triangle and give us a much wider perspective of our world, we'll see and experience much more than staying on the sides or the bottom. Our perspective of seeing becomes not only the vision part of it, but the feeling part of it.
Mhm.
Jamie's dog alarm has been triggered, meaning that
Ring,
he has to
ring,
be silent a bit. But I like the aspect of once Jamie's mic, interrupt me, Jamie, when your mic is live again, is I like the idea and the concept of seeing is not just the literal act of using eyes. There's the mind's eye, the body. What do we see is, I think, become a metaphor to understanding. Because even our expressions have come, oh, I see what you mean. Well, I didn't see what you said because they're words, they're audio, but it means I understood what you meant, or I felt what you meant. So I think seeing is a much deeper perspective of interpreting or receiving the energy from the world, and as Yoloki mentioned, what energy that we put into the world. Oh, your mic's off.
Beautifully said, because I want to make sure that you'll hear some energy
yes.
present in the background. What I want to offer is that invitation. I want to go back to the 4 clairs or the 5 clairs, the clairaudience, the whatever, because I think that what Claudia is pointing out to us is energy exists not just in the scene, right? But we'll go back to that language of the felt sense. And energy invites us when we're really present to develop something called energetic literacy. It shows up in those 5 areas, right? That empathy, it exists in all those levels. It exists in my dog behind me at this particular morning time. Does anyone want to speak to that? Because again, we look for the things in the 5 senses, if you will, in the world of matter. But when we're talking about things on the energetic level, they show up on those levels of those 5 clair, right? And I wish Ollie were here and he would tell us what the etymology of the word clair, as in clairvoyance, clair. If somebody does know that in the chat or whatever, I would be interested to find that out. But it's again recognizing that there's a different dimensionality to where experience is sensed, felt, aware. Help me through this, Joloki. Am I getting closer to where you were?
Oh, you're not getting closer. You're just right there.
You're on it. You hit the target. Bullseye.
Yes, and it's been interesting if someone is actually looking for the etymology. I believe I may be wrong, but I believe that the clair, clair, comes from the French clair. Clairvoyance comes from the French clairvoyance, which means clair, which means clear.
Mm-hmm.
So it's from again, from my perspective, where energy is the reference and matter is woo-woo. When we talk about the conventional 5 senses, seeing with the eyes, the physical eyes, is really being blind. Okay, and then let's use a vocabulary, a language. You open your 3rd eye and you see clearly, and you activate your clairvoyance, your clairvoyances, your clear sight.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
I just looked up clair and confirmed Yoloki's definition from the French and the Latin, meaning clear and bright or illustrious.
Mm-hmm.
So saying, bring us home here, if you could.
Yeah. Well, then I know it does go like what you were talking about too. It goes clear audience, right? Which is clear hearing, right? Which is receiving that information through your inner hearing, right? This is again, the things that we can't necessarily see. It's just your kind of like your interpretation, right? Your own sense of it. I think going even into when we talked about the interoception, right, where it's like understanding your internal world. How does your body feel? What does it need? And how is it responding to your environment? And again, I think those are things where we're not taught, which makes it so much more challenging as a grown-up to go, but I was never taught to understand how I feel. I was never taught to understand why my stomach does this. I was never taught this. And I think that's the part that's most challenging, because one, we don't take that time to pause to go, what is my body feeling right now? What does my body need right now? And what is the environment conducive to what my body needs right now? And I think that's what Claudia was talking about for sure too.
And everything
Right.
they're talking about, saying is developing that emotional liturgy.
Yes.
There's a number of people who have come into the conversation who are joining us in the chat. There's a number of people who are present to this conversation this morning. So I want to make sure that we go back to, we're talking about this idea of developing energetic literacy. And some of the things that have been emerging in this conversation that we've been having this morning are inviting us to recognize that it's not just experienced through the 5 senses. that one of the things that Jaloki began this conversation with was this idea that even though you, quote, can't see it, the evidence of it shows up everywhere, but it shows up in these different ways, which again, we were talking about the clairvoyance, the clairaudience. There, some of them are related to the physical senses, but there's also this felt sense. Just like Sang was inviting us with a kid who, is trying to explain what's happening in his inner experience, his experience, as opposed to his experience. It's us developing this capacity to recognize that energy exists on these multiple levels, right? And that oftentimes, even though we can be alert in our senses, we are also coming up against an awful lot of an awful lot of mental frozen stories about what this energy meant at one time. And so if we are going to find that clarity, right, that is provided by the clairaudience, the clairvoyance, or whatever, it's inviting us to really be present with developing this literature of recognizing, and I'm going to say this out loud, and Chiloki, confirm it if you will, energy speaks to us in very different ways. Fair?
Yes. Energy speaks to us in all ways. Well, again, this is my perspective, and it doesn't have to be shared by everyone. But for me, there's nothing that is not energy. Everything is energy, and yes, we have those senses, etc., and we have layers and levels. The language of the frozen story. There's a lot we can develop here, but also it reminded me of the analogy of the iceberg. Our consciousness is like an iceberg where you have 10% of the iceberg is visible. That's our conscious mind. And you have 90% that you cannot see, but it's the bulk of it. And this is our subconscious. And I would actually venture to say that what we call subconscious includes something that I call superconscious, which is different from the subconscious that has the memories and that informs the frozen story. The superconscious is actually informing the dynamic story, which is right now. It's not the past or the future. It's happening right now, but I'm not conscious of it. I can develop the neurologic or connection between my conscious and my superconscious, and this goes through my subconscious. And there's a plethora of exercises and techniques and systems and practices that I can do progressively or over a lifetime to develop that connection between my conscious mind, my subconscious mind, and my superconscious mind, and hence I develop my energetic literacy.
It's so interesting because one of the things that I was hearing you say when you were talking about those frozen stories, is how much trapped energy there can be in some of those frozen stories, right? And when a lot of those things, just like the person who was talking about in the chat, sometimes we're very aware that we're in a room and it makes us physically ill because of the energies that are there. But what if we are so disconnected from what is going on that it's not until years later that we realize how much we were putting up with, right? How much of that energy we were, instead of grounding, we were hanging on to, right? And it's just getting frozen and in there. That's why, I mean, maybe I'm the only one that this has happened to, but you come up into somebody and all of a sudden you say something and it just brings out this wellspring. Oftentimes we talk about it as if it's emotion, but sometimes it is just this fountain of trapped energy within us, right? That we've been hanging on to. And we don't even know whether or not it's an emotion or a feeling. We're still trying to unpack it. Again, has anyone else had an experience with that sort of that energetic release that's not necessarily an emotional release? Does that resonate with anyone?
I'm trying. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to think of, like, because I feel like anytime I'm like, even the most recent events where I feel like I just had to let it go is because it was all that built up emotional energy. So I'm not certain for that for me.
Well, let's look at it. Let's unpack that, because in addition to the emotions of what you're feeling, there are all of the insights that you bypassed, all of the
Mhm.
clairs, right? So I went through a very emotional Thursday this past week, right? And it did it unpacked a lot of unconscious emotion, right? Um, but what it also was trapped in that frozen story was all the insight that I had not looked at, that energetic insight, the read of what was happening live in the excuse me, in the situation that I could now look at. So maybe I'm being, again, weird about this, but I think that if we look at it as, recognizing that oftentimes there's a lot of trapped energy in those frozen stories that we carry, right? And that a lot of it gets expressed through emotions, but some of it is also the insight that we've been sitting on that we weren't aware of like, you know what, I should have fucking walked out of that room when that was happening to me, but I didn't have the tools and the capacity. That clarity, that energetic clarity, sometimes is also buried with those frozen stories. Anyone?
So I guess my question would be, what's the distinction between intuition and insight for you?
Oh gosh,
Because
are you going to come back to me?
yeah, I'm coming back to
Back
you
to
because
someone else.
when I think about that specifically, if I go into a room and I'm telling myself I shouldn't be in here, is that insight, or is that my intuition telling me that? And then do I now have the evidence from the past as insight? Because my body has already been telling me I don't want to be in here.
Well,
And
and
your
I'm going to
mind
make,
has to convince you to get out of here, which is the insight part.
and
I'm
again,
just asking.
yeah, in the world of Ray, I'm about to start to use words, and words, as you know, when we divide meaning, they just, but to me, insight is still the intellectual thing.
Yeah.
Intuition is the body sense, right?
Okay.
So I don't
Yeah.
see them as disjointed. I think that sometimes we have the insight that exists on this mental realm. And then I think we have this intuitiveness, this inner knowing, the thing that is just like, well, I had that felt sense that this was the right thing to do. Both of them exist, in my opinion. I think sometimes people invalue their insight, right? Because the insight is expressed in a sort of yang sort of way. And again, I realize I'm using terms and I'm not trying to, but intuition is much more of a yin, I feel like I should turn to Claudia right now because she's probably got all of the insight ready to go. Is there anything that resonates with any of what we're talking about, Claudia?
Well, I was trying to unpack what you were saying too, and I kind of agree with saying in that I believe that, and again, this is a belief. I believe that when we have an outpouring of expression that may come from not only emotional but the packed energies that have not been looked at or explored, that's all one and the same.
You're lucky.
And I see Jaloki has his hand raised. So as I'm sitting here with this a little bit more, go ahead, Jaloki.
Okay. I want to offer an approach maybe to synthesize what is being bubbling here. Let's say I enter a room and I have this feeling I need to get out right now. I need to get out. Personally, before I get out, this is what I do. Okay, something, someone, somehow is telling me to get out. Is this because of a frozen story? Is this because of a trauma? Is this because of something, a wound that is being triggered that I need to heal? Or is this from my higher wisdom that is telling me that this is not compatible, that this doesn't align with my energy, with my frequency, because if it's one or the other, I'm not going to do the same. If it comes from a wound, if it comes from a false belief, if it comes from a fear that was relevant maybe in the past, but not anymore. But if it comes from what I would call my oversoul, say, higher, or the super conscious, okay, then I'm getting out, and with no apologies and no explanation. So maybe that's, I don't know, maybe Jamie, that's
No,
what
no, 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 no.
you were
Joel,
talking
you're
about,
right. You're right where we're
emotion
talking.
and insight. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, just another one of those moments when Jolikie was sharing with us last week. Whenever the energy within him is so strong, sometimes his energy is so strong it interrupts his internet connection. We heard 99% of it, but I think what's so important about what you talked about is that's the master class. That what you're talking about is we're talking about developing this emotional, or excuse me, this energetic literacy, the awareness of it. What you just invited us into was that energetic mastery, which is the ability to figure out, to synthesize it, to address it, and to deal with it in the moment. And I think that in order to develop that mastery, and sometimes we fail, even though we could have misread that situation. Mastery doesn't mean that just because you're always going to be perfect at it. But what we're inviting people to consider this morning is that there is this energetic literacy, there is this blueprint, there are these ways in which of looking at energy differently. And what you've just outlined is if you will, to go back to use a term we use a lot here, is the active pause of okay, what is this energy that's here? Is it related to something that's from the past? And if so, I'm going to handle it differently. Or if it's this, I'm going to handle it in this direction. That ability to choose and not to be reactive is the energetic mastery. Oftentimes, we just get walloped by it, right? That energy hits us and we don't know what to do. And I'm so glad that you detailed that story. Claudia, did that help you kind of recapture any of the things that were happening while we were talking with you before?
Yes, and what I feel around all of this is that as we move through our life and our different energetic stages of our lives, we experience many different levels of being able to connect to um, inner energies and outer energies. Okay. And so when we're and now, especially, those two things are happening at a greater and louder pace. And so as we try to navigate and move through all of this, becoming more conscious and aware of what we feel is happening. In other words, our inner energy, becoming more conscious and aware of our inner energy is a grounding force for growth and awareness. And it is a grounding force for us to understand what is part of our source, who we are as source, and what is not who we are. And so, and so we can live in a much more grounded space once we can master those fields of energy in and around us.
So you've wonderfully given us the homework assignment for the week ahead, which I normally turn to Sang to see. But Sang, did you get that sense of it as well by what Claudia was saying? That we're almost inviting people to, in this week, experiment with their inner experience, right? Their experience. Can you help frame that for us?
Yeah,
Or-
it's gonna, to me, and help me, Claudia, if I'm on the wrong path with you, is understanding, one, what is that feeling like when you were talking about your husband, like what's going on when you're waking up? And I think that's the thing. That pause, like, oh, I just keep waking up every night. I can't get to sleep, and this and that. It's like, okay, so, and then you pause and say, ask, what's going on in your mind, right? Are you feeling it in your body? I think asking yourself just some what I don't want to call them simple questions, because they're not simple, but questions that are, what is your body feeling right now, right? Does my environment, is it conducive again to what I'm feeling? I think the questions that Yoloki were talking about, definitely, yes, definitely on a different level, because I'm definitely wasn't asking myself in the very beginning, what wound did this come from? So I think starting at that space of, what am I feeling? First, being able to identify the feeling that you're having, being able to identify, are you storytelling? Are you the distinction between storytelling and what is fact? And then being able to then slowly make that decision and determine what is needed for myself because of what I'm feeling inside my body.
Mhm.
Again, I think noticing when if you start having conversations with people and your body starts to get tense, mentally take a mental note or pause to yourself and say, what is that about? What's going on with my body right now? And then being able to go, well, what is that? Was it something that someone said? Was it the environment? Being able to also determine, where did it come from? Where did that quote unquote trigger come from in my body, where now my body is tense rather than relaxed, and just really understanding that somatic piece.
Yeah. We're coming up at the end of our hour. And so that was a really great way of being able to sort of, as it relates to energy, it's a different kind of pause. We've talked about so often in what we do, when these questions of being able to sort of act, because a lot of what we've been focusing is on behavior and choices and the way we conduct ourselves in the world. And when we open up the subject of energy, we're now suddenly recognizing that there's a current that is alive and present in all times. And oftentimes, what we want to make sure we're doing in the pause is trying to determine what that stream is, what those questions are, recognizing that it is alive, and it's whether or not it chooses to provoke our insight or provoke our intuition. Is there something that we do? Is there something that we don't do? How can we use this energy to be? I realize that we're actually almost, and I know Jessica's on the network. I don't think there's a show after us, so I'm going to bet, because I want to wrap up in a convenient way. Jaloki, I realize this is sort of like saying, okay, we've talked about the universe today. Wrap it up for us. Is there anything that you would like to say as some grounding thoughts to leave us with for today?
Yes, I don't know if this is grounding or if it's a wrap up. It's more like a just a little thought for people who are interested in engaging in the exercises that you suggested, Jamie and Sang and Claudia and Ray. I have a good news. When we talk about developing energetic literacy, there's a difference between developing how to read and write, because we're not born knowing how to read and write. We really have to learn it from the external. But energetic literacy, we're born with it. You were all born with it. So developing the energetic literacy is more about remember a mastery that we already have.
Mm-hmm.
Look at you throwing that down in the moment. There is so much more to say. I'm going to turn to Ray. Ray, anything else to say?
I think we're out of time, Jamie.
I know we are. But this is the thing about energy. We have it here. I am so great. Go ahead. Was there something you wanted to say though?
Oh, I just got a quick thought for our next session, or an extension of this conversation, is looking at the inquiry that Yoloki invited us to do, and Sang as well elaborated on it, is let's look at developing that as something that we can remember, as Yoloki has just touched on, that we already have the inner capability. It's just, we just have to exercise that muscle. So the inner inquiry, to even explore it, or to even what I do is replay something that has occurred in our life so that it can be updated to break the frozen
Love
the
this.
frozen story or history.
Love this. I'm grateful to all of you. And those of you there have been so many of you who have been popping in and out of this discussion today. I want to invite you. We do meet for a little while afterwards to discuss exactly what Ray is talking about at rsslive.org. If you'd like to drop into the room, it's, you're welcome at any time. We won't be broadcasting that part, but it will inform us next week. We're so grateful for the Breakthrough Show Network to allow us to be on their platform on YouTube. We're so grateful for all of you who are here. And I'm so, again, as always, grateful for the assemblage of people in this room. Until next week, let's wake up to what's emerging with Rise and Shine Sundays, and we'll see you back then.